Let me know and I'll make sure the mic's right where it needs to be. Basically, you know that we're going to talk about Buffalo City tonight, and I really appreciate everyone coming out on a rainy night, in the middle of the week, in an evening, whenever everyone would rather be home watching TV. I really appreciate it. It really means a lot. One thing that I want to start out with is talking about the importance of historical societies. And I have been a member of this society for months now. Wish it had been years. I'm also a member of a couple other historical societies now in state, but unfortunately these societies are not as vibrant as they once were. One thing I've learned in the last few months is that some counties in Arkansas are lucky to have a society like this one that's active with lots of members, and you're going to show up, you're going to participate, you're going to learn, and you have a publication, the Baxter County History Chronicle, that is a very good resource. Some counties don't have any of that, and part of it is because folks are aging out. If you look around, there's a lot of gray hairs. I'm 56 years old and I might be one of the youngest people here. And that is not a insult, that's to say, hey, where are the young ones? We need to bring people into this sort of historical preservation effort as much as we can. And I don't know how to do it. I don't have the answer. But clearly, in a few years, the faces are going to change. And that's what happens. For example, I've tried to go up and down the entire White River, meeting people at different historical societies and using their help and their resources, their libraries, their publications to start and then launch my research. Well, some counties are really good like this one and some have no one. Like, for example, Prairie County, Arkansas, there's only 6,000 people in the whole county. And so that has a big effect. Plus, they just don't have the participation like Baxter County does. Baxter County should be very proud that they've got so many people interested in local history. And keep it up. Good on you. But one good thing that I've obtained from this historical society in particular are some photos that are just incredible, like this one. I could not have obtained this photo from anyone else in the area that I knew of. And this is a steamboat, small steamboat called a packet that operated on the White River. And this is probably owned by the Pond family, which had owned stores and businesses in what I call Old Buffalo City on the Marion County side. Another photo, this is the Buffalo City ferry that was taken in probably the early 40s. One of the fellas, there's two of them on there, one of the fellas is named Short White. He is the father of Martha White Lee, who is a member of this organization. Not sure she's here tonight, but I could not have obtained this photo of Buffalo City without the help of the Baxter County Historical and Genealogical Society. So here's what we're going to talk about tonight. Where is Buffalo City? Well, most of the people here probably have been down to Buffalo City. You've gone down to the end of Highway 126, turned across from the Kubota dealership, driven about 10 miles, and you're at the public access there. You know, there's a sign that says Buffalo City, but after you pass that sign, there's probably not much to let you know there's a town there. There's some buildings, some houses, but as far as a store, a gas station, a restaurant, you're not going to find it because it doesn't exist. Buffalo City today is a small community of fewer than 100 people probably. There's no school. The last school closed in about 1949. And when the schools were consolidated. So there's been no school. There were some stores that operated a little later, but there have been no stores operating in Buffalo City for several years. Right now there's two businesses that rent boats and camping facilities and cabins, but other than that, you won't find a business in Buffalo City. So the Buffalo City I want to talk about especially tonight is what I call Old Buffalo City. This is on the Marion County side, and is actually in, this is a good map that shows you, this is Batesville down here, this is the White River, and this is where Old Buffalo City is. There's Yellville, as you can see. This is the Buffalo Fork of the White River, and you won't see Baxter County on this map, and it's because it's from 1850, when Baxter County didn't exist. I like this map because it gives you a perspective on some of these old towns and some of the old communities that were near Buffalo City. But the actual town was on the Marion County side, and there, right here, is an actual photo of Old Buffalo City. And this is the only photo I've ever found or ever seen. Now, if anyone in this room has any information, and I want to say this right now, any information, any photos, materials, maps, anything old that relates to Buffalo City, I really want to hear from you. But this, I had to find in Batesville. There's a museum there that I really enjoy, the Old Independence Regional Museum, and I recommend everyone go there. It's a great facility. But they have a collection by a fellow named Harry Miller. And Harry Miller lived in Batesville and was a photographer up and down the White River and in this area for about a decade, starting in 1910 and going to starting in 1900, going to 1910. He was paid to follow the railroad as it was being constructed up the White River Valley. And he took pictures of the railroad construction, the mining camps. There were entire camps of immigrants that were brought in from Europe because no one in Arkansas knew how to build a tunnel. And so they brought in people from Austria and Greece and Italy to come and build this thing. And Harry Miller took photos of the progress along the way, but luckily he took this picture. And this shows several dozen buildings. You can see some tents here, and those are probably related to the mines. There wasn't enough housing for everyone at the mines at Rush up the Buffalo River, and so a lot of people, whenever they jumped off here at Buffalo City, they had to spend some of their time in tents. So you can imagine that wasn't much fun. There was supposedly a lot of 7, I believe it was, saloons at one time, serving the mines as well. That's a lot. That's a lot of saloons in a small town. But this picture was taken by Harry Miller in about 1903. So why is it named Buffalo City? These are all questions that, as a journalist, I answer because that's what my training is. The who, what, how, where, when, and whys of the life. And so I started out and approached this with, well, why is it called Buffalo City? Where is it? So a lot of the use of the term Buffalo City is what I believe a tongue-in-cheek term, because there's never really been a city there. There was a small town. It was an itinerant community. In other words, people didn't stay there as much as they went there to get to somewhere else. You were going to go to Buffalo City to get to Fayetteville. You were going to go to Buffalo City to go to Yellville, to go to Springfield. You were going to get off the boat, usually at Buffalo City, because it was the last place that you could get up the White River in most water levels. So a fellow named Dickinson, we'll talk more about him here in a bit. Everett Dickinson, you may have heard of him. He was from the East Coast, and he luckily wrote some letters in 1848 from Buffalo City back home. And those letters somehow got preserved. I do not know how, but they ended up at the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette offices in Little Rock years ago. And several authors in the past have used this information. But one of the details that Dickinson adds is that he says that it's called Buffalo City. And one of those letters also talks about the buffalo crossing the shoals. All right, now the shoals are naturally a low water obstacle. They are bedrock. When you hear the shoals, it's a collection. So it's a bedrock that the river has worn down to, and the boats have a hard time getting up beyond the shoals when the water's low. And so Buffalo City was the place that you would get off because the shoals were going to be too difficult to pass through. So Dickinson names them, he says that the buffalo used to cross there, but there's no eyewitnesses. He didn't witness it because he even says that the buffalo were already gone by the time he had written those letters in 1848. So basically, I think it's probably an apocryphal tale. There's no eyewitnesses of buffalo crossing there, and it's likely named Buffalo Shoals because of the river, and the river appears much earlier in name than the shoals. An 1810 map done by Zebulon Pike shows it called the Buffalo Fork River. And then in the past week, since I gave my presentation in Batesville last weekend, I learned of a new map that's even older than Zebulon Pike's, and it is a Spanish land grant map from the 1780s. And so it predates Louisiana Purchase, it predates Arkansas as a territory, as a state, and it names the Buffalo River. It doesn't name the shoals, but it names the river, Cibolo. That was an Indian term that the Spanish adopted for the river. And that, to me, is the earliest naming of that area, and the shoals probably got named after the river, and then the city was named sort of tongue-in-cheek after that. Because Arkansas has got lots of humor, and that's just another humor, a joke that the people who live there. So what is Buffalo City? Okay, so Buffalo City is the last reliable year-round spot to access on the White River. In certain river conditions, you could go all the way up to Forsyth, Missouri. And that's quite a bit more travel on the river, and there are a lot more obstacles, and it's far more dangerous, but it was very good for people to get supplies. So Buffalo City as a shipping port, a commerce hub, and a place for people and goods to arrive for about 200 years. And now I say that because I've actually done the research and realized that it has been specifically about 200 years. And we'll go over that here in a bit. And then one of the most important things is that these roads led from Buffalo City to other places that, like I said, Fayetteville, a place called Old Carrollton that we'll talk about, which was the first county seat of Carroll County and was a very important trading hub, just like Buffalo City, and it was run by some of the same people we're going to find out. So let's talk about the earliest settlement, okay? This is really important, naturally, to any question. History really likes firsts and lasts, and so the first is going to be naturally the Native Americans. And artifacts have been found by people who lived there that date back at least 5,000 BC. If there is a excavation that was a determined and planned excavation and not just field hunting on the site, you might find artifacts dating back 10,000 BC. Likely there's no year-round European habitation prior to 1809, okay? And that's just because there's no records, the further back you go, that say anything about Buffalo City being inhabited. If anyone's done any historical research in this room, you know that the further back in time you go, the fewer records there are and the less reliable there are. Like, for example, a census taken today is extremely detailed and down to the address. A census taken in 1840 or 1830 was talking about regions and not specific towns, especially if it was a community. The earliest sectional survey began in 1826, and it was finished about 1830, and then the map was filed in 1841. This was a U.S. government survey dividing Buffalo City area into sections and townships and ranges. That's very important because that survey is a wonderful source of historical information. And one thing it shows, this is the map. This is the Buffalo, it says Buffalo Fork of the White River. The White River is the big curve there. Buffalo City would be here, Old Buffalo City. New Buffalo City is here. This is a field, and it's marked Wells Field. I don't know who Wells is, and it's because the records don't exist to tell you who that is. There are some Wells folks in this area. In fact, at Bennett's Bayou, there is a Wells family. Schoolcraft visits a Wells family when he travels through here. We'll talk about him in a minute. But I haven't figured out who this is. This is part of the mystery that I'm still trying to unravel.
Is Smith Island on there?
Did not exist. Smith Island did not exist. It's very interesting. This is a peninsula. You can see the buffalo turns very sharply. It's not an island. And it's because that was cut through at some point by either the river or people or a combination thereof. But that's a very good observation. So this is the earliest map that I've been able to find that shows details about where Old Buffalo City was. Now, some of the local historical lore says that there was a large Osage village at the site, which makes sense because there's been lots of artifacts. It's a good place to farm, but there's no actual records of that. In fact, I contacted the Cherokee tribe and I contacted the Osage Nation, and they said that they don't have any record of an actual village being there. Well, that makes sense. The Osage were mostly a Missouri tribe that used the Ozarks for hunting. So it was an itinerant group that came down. They would hunt here, and then they'd go back up to their big villages on the Osage River in Missouri. And so likely as not, this isn't true. But there's never been a formal archaeological excavation at the site. So there's no way to tell for certain. But as far as the local story saying that there was a large village, there's no real evidence of that. There's definitely Indian habitation dating back a long ways, however. So we talk about Schoolcraft a minute ago. Henry Rose Schoolcraft, you probably have not been to a historical society meeting here and not heard his name before. But he was a St. Louis fella that came down, and he was a geologist who was studying and trying to explore the area. He took about 2 or 3 months to go through the White River area and part of Arkansas, and in the process kept a journal. And that's one of the best things for us as historians and researchers. But he missed Buffalo Shoals because he went around it. He did not go down the White River there because he was told by locals that it was a rough spot in the water and it would be too dangerous. So he paid local hunters to carry his gear and boats down, and he walked overland. Here is a map. This is from the Missouri Department of Conservation. This is the Buffalo River right here. This is the White River, and that dotted line is the route that he took around Buffalo. So we missed an opportunity to have a first-hand account of what was there at a very early point, even before Arkansas was a territory, okay? Arkansas was still part of Missouri at that time. All right, so John Quincy Wolfe, he wrote Life in the Leatherwoods. He was born at Calico Rock, and if you haven't read Life in the Leatherwoods, I really recommend it. I had not read it until this year, and it is an incredible book about the Ozarks and early times. John Quincy Wolfe was a really educated fellow. He became a banker in Batesville, but he never forgot his roots growing up in a log cabin with a dirt floor. And so he gave us a lot of great information. He says that Major Jacob Wolfe from Norfork ordered his son William to build the first trading post at Buffalo City. There's no evidence of that. Outside of John Quincy Wolfe's book, there's no evidence. Now, it doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just means the records don't exist to back up that story, okay? He also claimed that the Friends, a family, last name of Friends, built the first grist mill on the Buffalo River near Buffalo City. Well, sometimes that has been copied by later researchers, and they attribute the Friends to Buffalo City, not the Buffalo River. Okay, so there's been some incorrect information repeated and reprinted over time that I've had to kind of dig through and figure out, well, what's real? What's the real story here? There's a fellow named A.C. Jeffrey. He wrote the first reminiscent history of this area. And he was from Izard County. He was a county judge at one point, but his family came here very early. And he was born in 1824. And he died in 1880, but his remembrances were published in the Melbourne Clipper newspaper, as well as the Yellville newspaper, the Mountain Echo. And these are some of the best early stories. But other people, like John Quincy Wolfe even, use Jeffrey's information and don't always attribute it to Jeffrey. And it isn't a case of plagiarism as much as he was telling history like he thought history was told by quoting the historians. And that's what John Quincy Wolfe did. So there's a lot of information that gets a little tangled over time, and my job has been to go through and untangle that truth and try and discover what really happened. So it hasn't been easy, but I recommend that anyone who wants to read about the early White River area to read Jeffries, because he definitely has some good stories. Then there's a fellow named S.C. Turnbow you may have heard of. He claims that a fellow named Gid Brown and his family moved to the Buffalo City area in 1809, but doesn't say exactly where. So I can't say that they lived right at the site of Old Buffalo City or even New Buffalo City, because it doesn't say. But Turnbow's stories are wonderful as well. If you haven't read the White River Chronicles, it's a wonderful book, but also the library in Springfield, Missouri has all of his writings for free online, both transcribed and not, the originals as well. And there's 819 of his stories that he collected up and down the White River, mostly around the Missouri borderline. And a lot of them mention actual people that you may have heard of in the past, family members, relatives. He was really good at what he did as far as a chronicler. But he also said that John Tabor, who was a very early settler here who lived at Yellville and on Crooked Creek, claimed to have planted a crop in 1830 at the site of Buffalo City. So we're getting a little closer to who was the first people to live at Buffalo City that weren't Native Americans. They capture information that no other source has. And he's been criticized by some people because he wasn't a professional historian. He was trying to make a little money selling his stories. But honestly, he was a fellow who, he was from this area, who really did people like me a great service by recording all these stories. So a fellow named William S. Moreland is probably the first person to ever live at the site of Old Buffalo City. He filed a land patent in 1855, that's not too early, but he was there according to Dickinson. Dickinson's writing his letter back home, and he says, "Old man Moreland," so he talks about him, and he says, "The old man is a rude specimen of a frontier man. He has lived on this farm 19 years. So that takes me back to 1829. Well, 1829 is the year after the Cherokee ceded their land that would have included Old Buffalo City. From 1819 to 1828, the Cherokee had a large reservation in the heart of the Ozarks, and the eastern border of that reservation was the White River. If you lived on the Baxter County side, which naturally didn't exist, you could be here as a settler. If you were on the other side, the government was going to come and remove you, or you were in trouble with some natives. So Dickinson is wonderful because he gave us the exact date that this guy says he showed up. And so as far as my research goes, the first settlement or settler to live at the site of Old Buffalo City was William S. Moreland, and we'll talk about more about him. So history is people. It's not about a place. It's not about a thing. None of us would be here if we weren't interested in the people that made history. So we're going to talk briefly about a few of these folks. W.F. Denton, he was a Batesville attorney who came here to Arkansas in 1829 with his family from Tennessee. And they went first to Cane Hill, which is over by Fayetteville, because a lot of early settlers went to Washington County first. It was closer to Fort Smith, so there was a military protection. It was also a place where they had early education. Just like Fayetteville, Cane Hill had a little college there. And if you haven't been to Cane Hill, it's been, in the last decade, purchased by a very wealthy person who is restoring the entire community. And I recommend going and visiting. They have displays, museums, full gambit of the things you probably want to see about early Arkansas. So William F. Denton is a person I had never heard of in my entire life, but I found him through the land patent records that are available for Old Buffalo City area. And he was a very well-known attorney, including practicing in Yellville, practicing up in Fayetteville and Benton County, practiced all over this area, but he lived in Batesville. And he operated, what I've learned, is a salt distribution network. Now, I did not know salt was so important, but of course it is, because it was pre-refrigeration days. And Mr. Denton was smart enough to buy some land at Buffalo City, Old Buffalo City, and he set up a salt distribution network, among other ventures. He also owned a steamboat called the General Morgan. He owned a keelboat. You got to think of these guys as people who would have enough money to invest in the land where the mall was going to be built. And they know the mall's going to be built there, and they buy the land and they profit off it. That's pretty understandable. And so things were no different in the 1830s and 40s. But Tilford Denton, his brother, and H.L. Denton operated stores in Old Carrollton. And Old Carrollton, as I said, is in Carroll County, and near Alpena, and it was on what was called the Old Carrollton Road. And the Carrollton Road was a very important and early road across North Arkansas that was built by the military in probably the early 1800s to help encourage natives to move west. They built a road, they didn't force them, they said, here's a road. And some of them did. But Old Carrollton was on that road, and Tilford and H.L. Denton were operating stores and also selling salt for their brother and making some money. Well, William F. Denton died pretty early. He died in 1845, and he was only 32 years old. He was a young guy. And Noland wrote his, C.F.M. Noland, if you don't know who he is, I recommend you doing a little research on him. He was a Batesville attorney as well, but also a very early chronicler of Arkansas. He wrote about this part of the country, or part of the state, as well as Fayetteville, as well as Little Rock, and got really well known for his writing, but he was a law partner of Denton as well. So this is one of the documents that I've found in what's called the Stroud Collection that I've uncovered in Batesville. The Stroud Collection is a personal family collection of documents, some of which is available at Lyon College in the Ozarks and Regional Studies section. But most of it is still in the Stroud family's house in their closet. I got lucky enough to be able to go through all of that material. I spent days and days and days reading old documents that had nothing to do with Buffalo City, just trying to figure out the ones that did have something to do with Buffalo City. This is an 1843 receipt, a bill of lading for a steamboat, and it has William F. Denton's name on it. And it doesn't talk about salt necessarily, but clearly it shows the connection. And then this right here, this goes back to our early survey maps that we were talking about. This is the sections just north of Buffalo City, old Buffalo City, and you can see the dotted line, and it clearly says road from Yellville to Buffalo Shoals. They weren't calling it Buffalo City there, and that was in about 1826, 1828 that was made. But this road connected up with the Carrollton Road, and so you would unload your supplies at Buffalo City, at Old Buffalo City, and then it would go overland to the settlers who needed it, including as far away as Springfield. But having this map with that road specifically drawn on it is incredible, because you can overlay this with the current county road and it follows it completely. Just completely. It's amazing. This is Old Carrollton. It's the only picture, I'm sorry it's bad, it's the only picture I've been able to find of Old Carrollton. But it wasn't big, just like Old Buffalo City. It was a small place where people came to do commerce mostly. Well, in the Stroud collection, I happened to uncover William F. Denton's salt book. I just about shook whenever I found this. My hand was quaking, because I realized that everything I suspected was true, that he literally was selling salt up and down the White River to make money. And then here's a letter from Tilford Denton, his brother, saying, hey, will you give this guy 3 wagon loads of salt? Thanks. And so that proves that there's a lot of salt going. 3 wagon loads is a whole lot. Well, in the probate of William F. Denton, there was a tract of land at Buffalo City containing 100 acres. Note on sales of salt at Buffalo City for $404. It sold for about 30 cents. I'm sorry, $2.50 a sack. The sacks were about 10 pounds, we're estimating. And this is a definite undeniable connection. 186 salts with William Moreland. So here's our William S. Moreland fella again. He's helping run the little store there, the steamboat warehouse, and he's helping sell salt on commission. This is all really fascinating stuff. To me, and I've heard so much about Old Buffalo City, and the steamboats and the stores, but no one talks about what they sold or what they did. So the salt's just one aspect of that. So let's talk about Everett Dickinson. This is one of my favorite people. Other people, including Donald Harrington in his book, Let Us Build Us a City, published in 1986, covers some of this story, the Everett Dickinson story. But Dickinson came from Massachusetts. He was a cousin of Emily Dickinson. He was well educated. In fact, he got here and he complained in some of his letters that people here were just a little ignorant. And it's understandable. There weren't any schools at the time when he was here. And the other thing he said was, there isn't a woman here who can cook a vegetable. But he was also writing to his mother and fawning over her garden and her vegetables. So he does tell some interesting things from his East Coast perspective. But the letters that he wrote, there are only about 2 or 3 of them that are in circulation. Well, I did the research. I contacted a museum in Hartford, Connecticut, and now I've discovered another 24 letters that were unknown from this guy. And they don't all come from Buffalo City. Some of them he wrote when he was in school, riding home. Some of them he wrote when he was on his way to Buffalo City, when he went to Memphis, Tennessee to stop and did some business. But he really writes about this place with a passion. You can tell that he really loves this place. And you kind of picture this guy as a young man trying to find his way in the world. That's what these letters are talking about. But he was a merchant there at Buffalo City, but he also was a merchant at Norfork. And he wrote some really interesting things about Buffalo City, a wild, romantic region of the country that has been little known. Although this place is called a city, there are only 4 male inhabitants. That goes back to the tongue-in-cheek notion of, we're going to call this a city. You know, that's Arkansas humor. That's what I consider Arkansas humor. Then he also talks about the place, and he says, it only suits a man like me, whom tired of town and love the wild mountains and wild men who are on and among them. I mean, what a really amazing statement about this place. And his letters, unfortunately, are not all transcribed. I have to transcribe them. And so that's part of my future work, is to go through and transcribe every one of these letters. Some of them I've read through. His writing, luckily, he has good penmanship, and his writing is just wonderful for the time. So they're really fun to read. So John H. Quisenberry is probably a fellow you guys have heard of. Quisenberry was one of the people who, he was a steamboat owner. He lived in Des Arc, Arkansas. He had come up to the Buffalo City area to try and make it an actual city. And he was selling lots. He had the place surveyed, 800 lots, if you can imagine that. And they must have been kind of small, to be honest. It's a big field, but it must have been kind of small. And the smallest lots were $22, the biggest $150. This is a time when land sold, the worst land for about $3 an acre and the best land for about $10 an acre. So $150 is quite a bit of money. But he had a steamboat and real estate empire that was basically destroyed by the Civil War. The Civil War did not treat Buffalo City well. Here's a great example. In 1840, the population of the township, Buffalo Township, so not the actual town itself, but the township where you would vote, was 91 people in 1840, which is pretty good. In 1850, we're talking 214 people. That's grown, you know. But in 1860, right before the war, we were up to 453 people. That's quite a few people for this area and at that time. But then in 1870, we'd gone down to 208. So literally half the population had been dispersed because of the war. John H. Quisenberry has a lot of other stories to tell, but because he's the one that most people might have heard of the most, I want to go past. But I did find his daughter's signature in a personal autograph book that was collected by people who live in Des Arc, Arkansas, and that's in Prairie County. And this is his daughter, Eliza Quisenberry. Well, that's important because John H. Quisenberry named a steamboat after her, and that steamboat was captured by the Confederates, used as a troop transport, and then scuttled at St. Charles on the White River near the Mississippi. And that was in an effort to keep the Union boats from coming up the White River, and that was in 1862. Well, John Quisenberry's entire life ended then, apparently, because he disappears from the historical record. There's no grave. In fact, I've gone to Des Arc and walked the graveyards looking for his grave. I cannot find where this man is buried. He may have been buried a pauper because he was selling out. He was losing everything because of the war. These are all research questions that I still need to answer. Okay, A.G. Cochran. This is a guy that I know none of you have ever heard of. He was one of the earliest postmasters at Buffalo City. He came here from White County, and he was a veteran of the Mexican-American War. He served as a mule skinner or a mule team driver for years in the war, for 2 years. But when he got back, he tried to apply for military bounty land and was refused. He was deserving, just like the other veterans who claimed land, but they didn't give it to him. So then he ends up at Buffalo City when Quisenberry is trying to divide it up into lots and make it a town. So he's the postmaster. He also has a store that he's running, And he's somewhat educated. He's not a completely uneducated fellow, but he is killed in the Civil War, and this is his picture. I got that from his family. They live in Missouri, and they said that he was dressed like Buffalo Bill. And clearly he's probably in a Confederate uniform, but there's some question about how he died, because half the family's history says that it was the bushwhackers that killed him, and half the family's history says it was the Jayhawkers who killed him. And so it's not easy to find out what side he fought on. Plus, the U.S. government doesn't have any record of him fighting, and neither does the Confederacy. So I haven't finalized A.G. Cochran's story, but he is such a fascinating fellow. He wrote letters to local papers trying to promote the town. And he says that we've got a new steam mill, it makes a great article of flour, and there are 11 families have moved there since it was surveyed. So there's still, by 1860, not that many people living there. And likely they're spread out in the woods, off into the other farmable areas, and not located right there unless they were making money from the town. They were working at the steamboat launch. They were running a store selling things. Well, where's Tony? This is supposed to be about where's Buffalo City. Well, this is a very interesting story. I got this map from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and this is the Buffalo River right here. This is the White River, and right where Buffalo City should be, it says Tony. This opened up a whole new can of research worms for me. Well, it turns out that he's Captain Lorenzo D. Tony. He moved there after the Civil War. He was fighting for the Union. His family moved up to, escaped, I should say, up to Rolla, because they were Unionists. And the historian Elmo Ingenthron from the Branson area, who writes about the Ozarks a lot, said very clearly that from Batesville to Rolla, Missouri, not one Union house stood after the war. And most of the folks who were Union sympathizers had to flee north to where there were Union troops. So Lorenzo Tony was really interesting because he helped fight the Klan in the 1870s. The governor of Arkansas had to form a militia to fight the Klan, and he was part of that militia. He owned the entire Buffalo City, the old Buffalo City site, and he sold it for $6,000 in 1888. And the newspaper says it was the largest land sale on record. And you can imagine how much money that must have been to a person who had literally come from nothing. The postmaster has the right to name the town, and he tried to change the town from Buffalo City to Tony. And that's why that map said Tony. So that answered the question. He was also postmaster in Gassville for 17 years, and he's buried in the Gassville Cemetery. This is the document that says, this is the postal registration document, it says Tony, and they marked it out and said, change back to Buffalo City. Because it had been Buffalo City since the 1840s. And so clearly someone in Washington, D.C. said, no, we're not gonna let you do that. Then this is a great photo that I obtained from the help of David Benedict here at the Baxter County Historical Society. None of these fellows look very happy. This is the Gassville, Arkansas Masonic Lodge from 1899, and this is Lorenzo Dow Tony. I cannot even believe I was able to find this picture, but it was only with the existence and help of the Baxter County Historical and Genealogical Society that happened. I have not identified the other fellows. They're not named. But I think it's a great picture, and it's wonderful to see the faces of the people. So let's talk about some of the people who are there today. I told you we were going to talk about firsts. Now we're talking about lasts. Well, Garland and Sue, they're in the front row right here. They have lived at the site of old Buffalo City their entire lives. Garland was born there. He was born in 29. His father bought the place in 1925. His father also used to play baseball at New Buffalo City on the Baxter County side before he ever bought that land. When he was a young man and lived down by a place they call the Rapids or Steamboat Shoals, which is below the mouth of the Norfork. So he really liked the land, and he had an opportunity to buy it, and they bought it in 25. They moved their family there in 27, and Garland was born in 29. And he was born in the last house standing from the original folks who were at Buffalo City. His father, Hamp Hurst, dismantled or used the old buildings. Some were used for farmhands because they were growing cotton and needed lots and lots of help. Some of them were used to rebuild barns for them, houses for them. They were like most smart archies, and they reused things that they had and made the most of it. So Sue's ancestor goes back even further. So Garland's family's had the place for 100 years. 100 years, if you can believe that. Well, Sue's family goes back 175 years at Old Buffalo City. So James Laffoon was her ancestor, and he moved to Old Buffalo City from Carroll County. So he had the family lived over in Carroll County by Eureka, and they moved back this direction. And the reason they did is James Laffoon knew Tilford Denton. And Tilford Denton, if you recall, was the brother of W.F. Denton, and he helped run the store at Old Carrollton. But he was also a county clerk and a state legislator in Carroll County. And on the documents that Denton that's been preserved from his time as county clerk, James Laffoon writes them. It says, written by James Laffoon. And either Tilford Denton had terrible handwriting, or maybe James was just smarter, who knows. But James was clearly connected to Buffalo City through the Dentons, and was likely talked into coming to Buffalo City, running the store, running the steamboat operation, and helping with the salt trade. And that was Sue's earliest relative. Here's the Garland and Sue at New Buffalo City. This is at the public access. I love this picture a lot. Here is Garland standing where Old Buffalo City used to be. It's just a field. It's been a field since his family's had it, and they removed the buildings. There were never any foundations at any of these buildings. They were all piled stone, rock. So if you remove the building and remove the piles, there's no sign other than, say, the trash or whatever detritus they would leave behind. But this is a great picture because yet another photo that I got from the Baxter County Historical Society. This shows the Pond family store in exactly, roughly, the same place, if you can see that. And you can look at the hill in the background, the Turkey Mountain, to really tell. This sign right here says, Star brand shoes are better. Well, I researched Star brand shoes, and they incorporated in St. Joseph, Missouri in 1899. Well, that picture is likely taken after that, and probably one of Harry Miller's photos that has been lost to time, and we need to find more of those. But this is such a great picture. You can see there's a tent off to the side, and that tent was, I think, one of the ones that showed up in the other Harry Miller photo. That's.
Are we seeing a telegraph pole?
No, I don't believe it is. I don't believe they ever had a telegraph there, and that was my first thought. That's great eye that you have. There's nothing else connected to it, and so I don't know where the telegraph would have gone. you know, it might have gone to Yellville, but that would have been a long line, and then who would have run it? Who would have put it there? Could it have been a remnant from the Civil War? Because the site was used by both the Union and the Confederacy to ship supplies up the White River at different times. So that's a great question. This is the Old Buffalo Cemetery. This is on Garland's property, and he maintains it every year. He goes in and he mows it, and his family helps pick it up and keep it straight. But one of my goals is to go in and count the graves. I want to find out how many, and including sunken depressions. A lot of the stones are falling over. Garland's done what he can over the years. He put metal crosses at different graves, trying to let you know where they are. But this is a wonderful pit. You can see Turkey Mountain and Stair Bluff in the background there.
Jason?
Yes, ma'am.
That picture of that stone where there's a little thing, concrete around it.
This is Garland's brother's grave,
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
And that was one of the last graves that was put there since they've
I think
owned
he
the
was
property.
6 years old when
He was 6? Okay, yeah. And so that's another reason that they maintain it, because their family's actually part of the cemetery. This is William Robert Hurst. This was the first Hurst of that side of the family to come to Arkansas. He came from Alabama in the late 1870s. He married to a much younger woman and started making babies again. This is his third wife, third family. And out of that union came Wade Hampton Hurst, and this is Hattie Bell. This is his wife. Her last name was Martin. Wade Hampton Hurst. What?
and Hattie Bell.
Yeah, Hattie Bell. And you can see Stair Bluff behind them in the background, and in the field where Old Buffalo City used to be. Clearly the buildings are already gone. But Wade farmed the land. He grew cotton for years. And then I guess he passed in 59, I believe it was. And then this is their children. This is Garland at the far end here. That's Baxter, who has been recorded in the newspaper and other articles talking about Old Buffalo City in the past, and he actually wrote a portion on the prehistory for the History of Marion County book. He was very, very avid Native American artifact collector, and really loved that property and that farm. And that's Kay, and then the 3 sisters there. And I'm just trying to demonstrate the continuity of the family. And this is one of my favorite photos. That's Garland on the far left there, and his brother. Is this Kay?
Yes.
That's Kay. And then these are some big trout that are hard to find in the White River these days. This was taken about 55, 56. And this fellow is the president of the college in Conway. And that's his wife. And the fellow who's taking the picture is the president of Southern Methodist University, I believe, in Dallas.
I don't know. It could be.
And their last name was Root.
Root.
Yeah, and that's the wife there. But that's a fine string of fish. Garland used the river and the site of Old Buffalo City. Not only did he live there, but this was a guide takeout spot at about where the public access in New Buffalo City is now. And so he was very involved with the Hearst Fishing Service run by his cousin Elmer. And it was a very famous fishing guide service. If you came to Arkansas and you fished, you wanted to go with the Hearsts. So here's a wonderful photo of Garland and some of his trophies that he's collected over the years living over there. Avid hunter. Love that picture. And then, of course, he's more of a gardener these days. The grandkids call him Grandpa Garden. And every year, 96 years old, every year he puts in a full garden. So we can all hope to be able to be like that. Well, as a guide, Garland also carved fishing lures that he called the Little Dock. And he sold them up and down the river to anglers and to boat docks and boat rental places. And they were really big lures for smallmouth especially. Here's some right there. And I'm proud of this one because that's one he gave me. And then, more importantly, this is the paddle made of sassafras, the same wood that he makes the lures from, that Garland carved for me as a gift. And I treasure this. It's one of my best. Thank you, Garland. This is the school bell from the school at Old Buffalo City. Now, Garland attended that school. Sue went there briefly before she went on to Cedar Creek School. But Garland went there through 8th grade, and the school closed up a few years after he graduated, and there weren't enough kids around. Most of them were on the other side of the river, and then the schools were being consolidated. But this is the school bell, and his family still owns it. This is Sue's family home. This is the Laffoon cabin that had been up, not at the site of Old Buffalo City, but up the hill, okay, towards Cedar Creek, up Hathaway Mountain.
This was at Cedar Creek.
Oh, this was at Cedar Creek. And the Laffoon family, right here, this is your mother. This is Nora, right, as a baby. And then this is Judy, right, Grandma Judy.
Judy, yeah.
And then this is Thomas Laffoon. This is the grandfather.
And my grandma and my mother. She's older than my mother.
The baby is Nora.
No. The little girl.
There you go. So this is Prilda.
Yeah.
This is Prilda Laffoon.
And then that's mother.
And she was a maxie. Prilda was a maxie too, right? And then this is Nora. Okay. Well, this is Flavius Laffoon's wife, Judy. And they moved there before the Civil War, and she looks like she went through the Civil War, because she did. She literally did.
What year was that picture? Do you know?
Well, if her mama was born in 1913, and so...
About 20 there.
No. She's a little one. Yeah, the little one. So she's maybe 2. So maybe this is 1915.
Okay.
Yeah. And then here is Flora, Nora, and Thomas Laffoon. And don't you just love that quilt? Wouldn't you like to know where that quilt is? Isn't that just beautiful? Well, this is the father. This is Sue's father, Claude Wynn. And he's sitting on the cabin of their home that was just down the road from Old Buffalo City. And this is Sue's grandmother, Miss Tilly, right? And this is a wonderful painting that their granddaughter painted, Sandy, and I just think it's just amazing. And what a treasure to have in your family, right? Well, this is Claude and Nora, Sue's parents, about the time that they got married. And so this would have been in the 30s, right? And this is Sue right here. This is Claude. That's Nora. And that's Sue's brother, Dawn, who is also right here, scrubbing dishes with forest wood. I don't know if any man can get as far in life without doing dishes after seeing this picture.
Forrest wrote that on the bottom.
Yes, right there. They're in action. So if you had a guide, this was on a guide trip on the river. Her brother was also a guide. And if you can only imagine, this is way before Ranger boats was ever even thought of. Yeah. But it's important to know that Garland worked for Ranger boats his entire life, or most of his adult life, and helped design and build the very first Ranger boat. And Forrest was known to say that he didn't make any decisions in that business without talking to Garland first. And that tells you right there what an important person Garland Hurst was. All right, let's talk real quick about the Harry Miller photographs, okay? The reason we want to talk about these is because there's some other photos. There was a book that was put out about 20 years ago by the library or the museum in Batesville in cooperation with the Museum of Discovery in Little Rock, and they feature his photos, but they misidentified all the ones from Buffalo City. Well, look at that ferry photo. See the bluff in the background? They had this identified as Pinter's Bluff, which is down towards Batesville on the White River. This is clearly Stair Bluff, and clearly shows that Harry Miller was on the old Buffalo City side in a wagon. My guess he was going to the mines, he was going to the city. There's probably lots of photos that exist somewhere that I haven't located them. Unfortunately, the Museum of Discovery has gotten rid of all of their Harry Miller photo archive and cannot tell me where it went. I've written them, I've called them, they don't even communicate. I know, it really is. So who knows what happened to those. All right, so here is the bluff looking up at the shoals. This is Buffalo Shoals right there. And this is probably the section boss for the railroad, because he was building or following the railroad up, and you're probably going to take a picture of the muckety muck who's with you, you know, and that guy was probably pretty important. And he's got his little doggy, I love that. And then here is a picture on the old Buffalo City side, on Garland and Sue's side, that showed Harry Miller was a fancy photographer. He wasn't just taking a picture, he was trying to do art. And he had taken the picture trying to show the shoals and the water and how difficult it is. And then this is a ground level, right here, this is where the bed of the railway would have gone, looking across at the steamboat landing at Old Buffalo City. And you can see a building or two poking out. And then of course, this is the big version of the blown up image I showed you earlier. This has Old Buffalo City, and this has the guy sitting on the bluff, and then this is the shoals that everything is named after, right? Well, yeah, the dog's somewhere. When I saw this photo, I thought this was Stair Bluff, and this was New Buffalo City. And I could not put my head around it. It's like, okay, well, where's Smith Island? Where are those mountains? And then I turned literally in my mind upstream and said, that is Old Buffalo City. And it's the only photo. Now, some of you may have a picture in your trunk in your attic that is even better than this, and I'm happy to see it. But for now, this is the only picture of Old Buffalo City that exists. Well, thanks for coming out. I've got a lot more research to do. There's going to be a book. And it's going to be called Where is Buffalo City? Because that's the ` question I get asked from people when I tell them I'm doing this project. They're like, well, where is that? And now you know a little bit more about where it is.
It was wonderful. Wow.